Um, Miko is not my brother, but he's more famous than me, I can see. So when I was asked to speak here, and I found out I was speaking at 6:30, generally where I'm from in Hong Kong, 6:30 is networking drinks. And the fact that this community is still very engaged at this point is really quite amazing. Today, I'm going to talk about a very important topic. The reason why I think it's so important is that while I was here, I have been pitched 20 times for ICOs just today. It must be a record for me. So it's truly that ICOs are revolutionizing the way funds are raised, but unfortunately, only a few will succeed. I'm sure you've heard this many times. How many people here are familiar with the modern fool theory? Just a raise of hands. Well, basically, it says that the value of any object and the way it increases is not based on its true value, but what sort of hype that's around this. So the irrational belief that is attached to it. And there's nothing more resembling of this than ICOs. We have had a tremendous amount of hype around this. I want to give you a chart. Now, everything I put up is out of date because things are moving so fast. But, year to date, now Bitcoin is up dramatically, over 1,000%. But I want to compare what's happening relative to other asset class. This is a 10-year chart. And this is every bubble that I've lived through. The U.S. housing prices, NASDAQ, Japanese stocks, gold prices. It doesn't even come close to compare to how much Bitcoin has gone up. And that's 10-year history. So why is this still a phenomenon that actually can continue? Is that if you look at M2, which is an indication of cash and non-cash, still cryptocurrency only represents 0.1%. So this is very much a very small, it's not a trend that everybody's already in. I'm sure people have seen this, the Gartner hype curve. Now, what I want to illustrate here is that there are, every technology actually goes through this hype machine. In here, I've illustrated quantum computing, IoT, machine learning. And as you can see, blockchain is actually coming down. But the whole time the hype is taking place, the reality of the actual technology is increasing. But I will say to you, with almost every technology that is hyped, it comes crashing down. It never comes down gently. At some point, you actually have the hype curve cross the reality curve, and this is where it starts to get interesting. And over time, the actual technology evolves and it becomes real. So ICOs. Now, basically, it's just another form of crowdfunding. So, when you look at the history of crowdfunding, it's been around for a very long time. In the modern era, it actually dates back to 1997 in the internet era with the online music industry. So, really, it's just basically a Kickstarter on steroids, but it's really having a dramatic impact globally. And when I go and travel all around the world and I see this enthusiasm about ICOs, I am really surprised how global it has become. So why are these ICOs so revolutionary? Let's just look at it surely from a funding comparison. Let's look at this chart. So if I'm a startup and I want to get funding, it's very natural just to be able to, if I don't even have a working product, I can do an ICO. The process is 2 to 4 months. The legal and regulatory environment is relatively ambiguous. Distribution of capital. This is the thing that's amazing about it. You get it fairly quickly. And also, the actual oversight after you do the fundraise is not that onerous. Meanwhile, when you compare it to VC money in blockchain, well, if you've ever gone through a due diligence process with a venture capital, they know the color of your underwear, basically. So really, it's a very different process. They're going to drill you with questions, and they're going to audit you, and they're going to see all these things about you. The process takes a little bit longer than an ICO. And when you get the capital, if you actually get the capital, you will find that you have to meet milestones constantly to get the full capital in the end. Some people compare ICOs to IPOs. Well, I will tell you they're nothing alike, besides it sounds similar. Because an IPO is only relegated for really developed companies with real products in the market. The process for doing an IPO takes a very long time. The regulatory framework is very severe. The listing requirements are very high. That everybody, when you actually get the capital, you're going to be scrutinized. So the process by which you get it is a much different process. So there is really very little comparison between an ICO and an IPO. So what I try to do is I want to make ICOs very simple. And what we've done here is put it into basically 4 categories. There are good ICOs and bad ICOs, good projects and bad projects. So the probability is that you have to be in this green area. The green area, just because you have a very successful ICO doesn't mean you have a very successful project. So just a little landscape. I'm sure you heard all these, and my numbers might be slightly different, but we looked at half. So the top 10 deals, half of them went up, and they went up significantly. 3.6, 3.8, billion dollars raised as of November of this year. And basically now funding from VCs are more than 3 times more. Funding from ICOs are 3 times more than blockchain investments by VCs. And when you look at, the crypto investors, very simply, there are professionals that do this. There's those who are getting more knowledge about it, and basically there are those who are novices. But in the world, there's 19 million ETH wallets, and increasing 100,000 a day, and most of them are held by millennials. That's important to note in terms of market structure. So why have ICOs become so popular? And everybody's seen this chart. And so basically, the second quarter of this year, something very interesting happened. In the beginning, it was a bit of where Bitcoin prices were moving up. And since most of the people that are investing in these have wallets, they were using their, the money that they raised or that made, and they were investing in ICOs. Now, it's exactly the opposite. The higher Bitcoin prices move up, people would prefer just to keep it in Bitcoin rather than invest it in ICOs. But what we saw is a very important thing is that the number, anecdotally, we saw a lot more pitches that and more events that were taking place where ICOs were paying large sums of money to pitch at events like this. So this is something that we saw as a phenomenon that took place in the second quarter this year and has moved up quite dramatically. So which ICOs actually succeeded? So this is the top 10 ICOs, and of them, 4, there's basically 2 that are not listed yet, but half of them have gone up dramatically. And what we did was we wanted to figure out which ones do well. So we went and looked at every ICO that's ever been done. And what's interesting is that the small ones, the ones that are less than 1 million, and the ones between 10 and 24 million are the most successful. Now, it looks a little odd, right? The reason why the 10 to 24 is because that's Ethereum. If you take that out, the largest performance are really the small ones. That's because the return on investment is much higher. The people that raise less money, they're much more frugal, and their performance has actually been much better than the ones that have raised a lot more money. So what we also did was we looked at the whole universe and classified these ICOs into 6 categories. There are protocol tokens, and there are platform tokens, asset tokens, equity tokens, reward tokens, and marketplace tokens. We did this in order to understand which ICO categories actually do better than others. We really wanted to understand what was going on here. So what we discovered, and this is probably the crux of my thesis here, is that there are certain trends that are taking place. So about the most number of ICOs happen in the platform ICOs, followed by reward tokens and marketplace. They represent about 80%. When you look at it from the amount raised, platform tokens raise the most amount of money. So let's look at the performances. And this is interesting. So the platform tokens have the best performance. Equity tokens have the second best. The worst is the marketplace tokens. And I hear marketplace token pitches all the time. And what we also did is to determine on average what these categories of performance look like. And one of the things that we discovered is that, of course, platform tokens, the reason why they are so successful is because their scalability is so large. But we also discovered that the one area that we are seeing it's way overdone, the performance is not that good, is actually reward tokens. There's a lot of them, and the performance is not that good. But the thing that we found also is, we believe is based on regulations, is that the equity-based tokens are the ones that have been mostly overlooked. We think there's a lot more opportunities in that category. So some of the things that we're looking at is there's 2 basic process, right? You raise money for an ICO. After you raise money, then you actually have to get the project done. The things that we found that were important in that process and that you're being evaluated is that the product development, the more developed the product is, the more the token is actually vital to the project, that is a much more safe, successful ICO. The less the 2 categories are utilized, the more risks are involved. Now, I want to give you some statistics when it comes to products. And it has to do with startups. When you generally have companies that are funded that don't have their product ready, 95% of them fail. So if you are actually talking to a ICO where their product hasn't even been developed, it's just a white paper, these percentages likely won't change for an ICO. So what I like to do is to kind of give you some case studies. We've left the names out, but I want to give you some sense as we uncover what's happening with the various different types of ICOs. The first example is a marketplace ICO, and it is one that was started by industry experts that did not have any blockchain experience. It was not a new company. They had the technology already in place. All they were doing was porting it to blockchain. They started the ICO roughly at the time when China banned ICOs, and they had to quickly change their strategy, and their market was relevant because they were much more B2B focused. Therefore, they did a lot more in the pre-sale. And this project actually did a lot of raising money in the pre-sale and very little focus on the public sale. If you look at their website, when you look at their marketing, it's all very B2B. And they were very successful with this approach, but this is not just an approach that they are successful with, and this is what's happened in the ICO market. What's happened in the ICO market is that if you ever go on all of these websites that are the crypto websites, they have marketing everywhere. The marketing spend has gone up dramatically, even in the last 2 or 3 months. The number of new ICOs that are coming out to the market one of their biggest spends is in the marketing area. But the ROI has gone down dramatically. So people had to change their strategy, focus a lot more on the private sale. The second example is a reward-based ICO. Again, this is a crowded space. They pivoted many times. They did not use a professional to review their white paper. Their tokenomics was not something that was appealing to investors. The product was, but what happened was once they actually brought this to the market, investors would read it and there wasn't enough there for them to invest. They changed the dates on the ICO, pre-sale, public sale. I think you can guess what happened. So what happened with them is that they did not really understand the process that you have to when you market and you're communicating with the audience, that when you change the parameters of your ICO, you can largely leave a very negative impression to the investor community. And lastly, the last group was a market-based ICO as well. And what happened with them is that they were a very experienced team with blockchain experience. They started a project in June, and just so everyone can get a better sense of success rates, the third quarter ICOs that were launched, nearly half of them did not meet the hard cap, which is a massively different statistic than what happened in the first and second quarter. So this all happened in just in a short period of time as one quarter. So these guys launched earlier. They didn't have the negative impact, and but at the same time, they really had it much more honed down to their marketing message, so that it wasn't so much of a mixed message to the investors, and they were very successful with their ICO. So what have we learned from these examples? And these are real examples, by the way. What we learned is that it's very important, your team. One of the things that everybody wants to figure out in your business plan and your strategy is, can you actually build what you say you can build? That's why, if you notice, the geeks right now are the ones that are raising the big money. It's not the marketing gurus, because they actually know how to execute the strategy. So also, what we discovered is that if you're going to raise money, the smaller, the better. Better ROI, better performance. And then if you're going to raise it, you want to raise it in the areas that you're going to get the most amount of, it's not too crowded. So, reward-based ICOs are very crowded. And you should look at where you see the most amount of, I'd say, uniqueness. So I'd like to leave you with just one thing. A quote from a famous president, Abraham Lincoln: "I can't wait for the future. Unfortunately, it comes one day at a time." Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thanks, Juwan. We've got 2 questions already. The first one is, do quantum computing...
I'm sorry, can you say that?
Do quantum computers pose a threat to modern cryptocurrencies?
Do quantum computing hold a threat to...
Pose a threat to modern cryptocurrencies?
Well, quantum computing has been around for a very long time, and I think that quantum computing power is something that is very important. I don't know if it's a threat. Technologies can live side by side. So what I believe that they can live side by side without disrupting the other.
Okay, thank you. The other question is, how will fundraising made with blockchain and cryptocurrencies change the venture market? Venture market.
Sorry.
VC market.
Oh, okay. I think that ICOs have forever disrupted what's happening in the VC market, in the sense that you are now empowering startups to have many different options for funding. This is a very important trend. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed about ICOs, is that venture capitalists are starting crypto funds, not just because the smartest people are there, it's because we're seeing such a big change in the way money is going to be raised. Also, what it's doing is giving everyday people an opportunity to get into very interesting investment opportunities, and that's something that only angels and VCs did in the past. So it's a very disruptive, and it's going to have a large impact on the VC model.
Okay, we have one more question.
Hi, it's actually 2 questions. It's here on the right.
Okay.
Hi. First question is, how do you define successful ICOs? You mentioned the term, but I want to be very clear about it. And the second one is, do you have experience with good ICOs without any pre-sale? And because you gave example one with a complete pre-sale or half pre-sale, I just want to hear your opinion on that. Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay. So a successful ICO is an ICO that basically, in the very beginning, they set soft and hard caps, and they met their hard cap. So based on their original expectation, they raised the amount of money that they expected to do. Many are now changing how much they're raising. Some of them actually meet the revised numbers, but not the original numbers. And what was the second question? Yes, so ICOs without pre-sales, this is what we are discovering about that. There is so much competition to differentiate yourself and to know that there is some credibility, that the ones that are just going to the market and they want to raise a large sum of money is very difficult. If they want to raise a small amount of money, let's say less than $1 million, that's a little bit different. But the larger the money you want to raise, you want the momentum of the pre-sale to impact and have a positive impact on the public sale.
Okay, we have the last question.
Thank you very much for your thoughts, and I want to ask you about fundamental shift in minds. As it was before, investors give their money and buy shares, company shares. And after that, they should sell these shares to next investors or to IPO. But with ICO, investor could invest money and buy tokens. But after that, they could sell tokens to customers. And at this point, customer development is a really key thing, because if you do not prove great customer development, it will be really difficult to sell your tokens later for investments. But I examined a lot of white paper, and many startups do not focus enough on customer development. What is your opinion about customer development and this kind of transitions when investors buy tokens and sell this token to customers?
I think
Thank
you
you.
brought up a very important point. I'm in the business of building ecosystem. So I actually know this problem very well. And when anyone approaches me with an ICO and they want to raise money, they have no idea how to make a marketplace. The only thing I ever learned about making a marketplace is that you only know how to make a marketplace if you've created or tried to create a marketplace. So this is one of my pet peeves about people that are doing ICOs. To get customers' engagement is extraordinarily difficult. So on one hand, you can get and have a successful ICO, but have a horrific project. And the one thing that you have is that you don't have that long of a window to start to prove your case. So I think that when you start to look at the ones that I showed you on my list here, the ones that literally have raised the most amount of money, that is not necessarily going to be successful. It just means that they raised a lot of money. The real story will be later when they don't or do meet their milestones. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Juwan. Thanks, Simon Dixon.
I created